Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, after over a year, I am finally able to bring you this really awesome review of the completed Transformers Legacy Menasor, aka the Stunticons. So if you've seen any of my completed Combiner team reviews before, you should have an idea of how this goes. I'm just going to do a quick look at the separate members, just to get you up to speed on what the group shots look like in both their alternate and robot modes. I'll be comparing them to their previous counterparts, which will be the Combiner Wars Stunticons in this case. And then lastly, we'll put together the big combiner himself, Menasor, compare him to his Combiner Wars namesake, and then just give my thoughts on this guy as a whole, and hopefully help you all decide if going in on this team is a worthwhile investment. So you can see I have the Stunticons right here before us. Going left to right, we have Dragstrip, Breakdown, who I just reviewed prior to this, Motormaster, Wild Rider, and Dead End. And Wild Rider thankfully gets his name back instead of just being called Breakneck, which was a terrible name. Especially because they spelled break like the car brakes. And it just made this like really goofy pun. I'm like, wow, haha, that's funny. So yeah, glad to see he got his name back. And they look really cool together. They are the Stunticons. They're supposed to be these like stunt or derby vehicles, and I mean they work for that, right? Most of them are race cars. Then of course you get a semi truck, but I guess you can do stunts with semis, right? So it kind of works. And they just look cool. The vehicle modes, I wouldn't say they scale very well. I think Dragstrip is probably way oversized for the type of vehicle he's supposed to be, but they do also have to turn the robots to scale with each other. And, my stance has always been robot scale trumps vehicle scale. Like, I don't care if you have a 20-foot motorcycle, if the resulting robot is supposed to be that height. So, that's my stance. Other people may feel differently. They may be really bothered by the fact that maybe the semi is a little undersized compared to, these cars. But I'm personally happy with the scaling. In fact, I'm such a stickler for robot scale that I actually would have preferred if Motormaster was just like a Voyager or Leader class size toy, where the robot is just made of the entire semi like the G1 toy, and this were, more of a traditional combiner with like proper limbs. I'm going to try not to beat that point up too much throughout this review. I know I've talked about it extensively throughout the, individual reviews for these guys about my preference of combiners, so I'm going to try really hard to just focus on what's here and judge this set and this team and this combiner purely on its own merits. All right, now here we get our first comparison shot with the Combiner Wars Stunticons. So we're doing the vehicle modes first. So, Legacy on the right, Combiner Wars on the left. And you can see the Combiner Wars Stunticons actually have a sixth member. That's a form of little Blackjack here, who was originally a Micromaster, but in Combiner Wars actually became a member of the team and forms the little car on Menasor's chest that used to just belong to like a piloted drone for Motormaster. Sadly, the new Motormaster doesn't include that drone or any way to, simulate or accommodate that, so that whole aspect's just been left out entirely, whereas with Combiner Wars, they went the whole route of actually making that a fully fledged character. So you can see design-wise, a lot of differences between these. Combiner Wars played very fast and loose with the designs of these characters and weren't too concerned about strictly adhering to G1 accuracy, so a lot of the alt modes have been updated with a more futuristic look. And there was also the fact that they had to kind of plan these toolings in advance to be other characters, which is why you see Dragstrip only having 4 wheels instead of 6 so that he could become, somebody like Mirage later. Or Motormaster having a trailer-free transformation and combination so that he could also be used for an Optimus retool. So there was a lot of that going on. We also saw Wild Rider just be a straight head swap of Dead End, but that's because originally this team didn't have a Wild Rider. They were sold with a pickup truck off-road, and then Takara sought to rectify that in their Menasor set by just retooling Dead End to Wild Rider to, have a quick fix. And Hasbro eventually picked up that molding and released it as an exclusive. And they would actually go on to do that with these aerial bots as well as the Combaticons. So you can see at a quick glance, they're all pretty recognizable as the same characters, except maybe Motormaster, because they did change him so drastically, and they also changed his primary color from black to gray. So they're kind of, I guess, combining the aesthetics of his cab and his truck into one. And I actually wasn't really crazy about the Unite Warriors show-accurate recolorings of the Combiner Wars toys, but I would say that the Stunticons probably benefited from that the most, because they at least got a black Motormaster, and he looked a lot better. So yeah, I guess, what do you guys think? Do you think that, the new team is better than the old team in every way? It's definitely more accurate for the most part, except for maybe Breakdown's vehicle mode, which, I covered in his review. It's not the right vehicle mode, but, whatever. Or do you maybe think that the older vehicles have some sort of charm that the new ones lack? I can't imagine the old team is going to be very popular with most people, but you never know. There might be some people that are really into it. And now we get our Stunticons together in robot mode, complete with Motormaster's base in the background, and they look absolutely great together. Even more so than in vehicle mode, because the fact that old Breakdown here is a retool is a little bit less obvious. Right, the robot mode's a bit more unique than the vehicle mode, at least comes off looking that way, between the colors, then, the new tooling on the head, chest, pelvis, all that. And I gotta say, overall, I think the team was worth the wait. Unlike Combiner Wars, that first two waves aside would give us entire teams in one go. Like, each wave after the first two was like a complete team for a Combiner. In this case, they made us wait because they didn't want to make an entire wave a Combiner team, because Legacy isn't specifically about Combiners. They wanted to get more stuff in there, so they just kind of sprinkled these guys in each wave throughout the last 4 waves, or 3 waves and a new one if you consider Evolution separate. Now, while I don't really like waiting to complete Combiners, I do feel it was definitely worth waiting, because this is definitely the best the Stunticons have ever looked. And getting the new base for added play value to where you can really make them interact with each other and look like they're doing something is just icing on the cake. And now we can do our robot mode comparison with the Combiner Wars Stunticons. And you can see, even more so than the vehicle modes, these guys just look very, very different from one another. Part of that is because of, certain characters being retools of others, whereas in the other group, it's different characters that are retooled. It's also, as I said, the fact that they had to plan ahead and make these guys into someone else. So, they look a little off compared to the normal G1 model. And they get Combiner Wars Motormaster, who's just a disappointment anyway. It's just bleh. Now, one nice thing I will say about the older toys, they definitely have some bulk to them. They are generally a little bit bigger, being pre-War for Seibertron, where toys tended to be a little bit bigger, a little bit, larger scale. But they also just kind of have this bulky quality to them, real broad shoulders and everything, that I do feel the new Stunticons kind of lack. They're very lithe by comparison, and for guys that are supposed to be like real rough and tough rubber rouser types, you'd think they could look a little more filled out, especially these two. Dead End's still kind of a wide boy, but these two are very scrawny looking by comparison. So, I will give them that, and I did always love the very toy-based colors that they use for Combiner Wars. Obviously, the Legacy stuff is more based on the cartoon, whether it comes to sculpting or coloring. I do like the deeper colors of the toys, especially that nice maroon color on the Combiner Wars Dead End there. I like that more than the red and black on the cartoon-based one. So, there is something nice to be said for them. But I do think it's undeniable that just as action figures and as representations of the characters as people remember them, the Legacy toys definitely do it better. Plus, something to point out, for some reason they were really determined to make all of the Combiner Wars Stunticons have melee weapons as their main weapon, not including the hand-foot gun. I don't know why, because that's not normal, right? They're all supposed to have blasters of some kind, with the exception of Motormaster there, though he gets both. Can't really see his blaster, but it's down there. Because he's cool, because he actually combines both his weapons to make a bigger sword for Menasor. Unlike this guy, he just uses his own sword, which ends up looking pretty small by comparison. Now you can see I have my Legacy Breakdown wielding his weapons combined like an axe, which is not what I like to do, but it's only because the boomerang option just looks even more stupid. So he gets to have a melee weapon unlike his teammates. And then I haven't even touched on Blackjack over here. I mean, there's no one to compare him to. He's just doing his own thing. He's filling in for the car drone, which we'll see here in a moment. And he doesn't hurt the team. He kind of fits right in. He's almost like the kid brother member, being a little bit smaller and kind of scrappy, but I mean, he even matches the aesthetic that these guys have of having some sort of melee weapon. So I think it is a cohesive team. Even if the molds themselves, aren't great and are very dated by 2023 standards, they were good for their time. But this right here, much, much better. A much better representation of the actual Generation 1 characters. All right. And now, after over a year of waiting, we can finally see our completed Legacy Menasor. So to put them together, we're going to start out like this. If you're not sure how we got to this point, just go back and watch, the individual reviews on the figures, check out the instructions, whatever you got to do. But, basically I have all these guys pre-staged to be attached to Menasor. I also got Menasor with his arms contracted right now, because that's how you want to attach, his two arm bots. So we'll start with that. Go ahead and take drag strip here. Plug them in. See all these ports right here. Get them on there. That's going to release his little latch mechanism, which will allow Menasor's arm to fully extend and gain its L-bar articulation. I'll just let you flip those wheels in like that. So got the one right there. Make sure everything's nice and straight and pretty. All right, then we're gonna do the same thing with dead end. We're just plug them on there. Make sure you line everything up. Try to get those 5 little holes to line up. There we go. All right, he's in there, which means now we can separate him. Extend the arm out. There we go. All right. So the arms are done. Be warned, your dead end might try to separate on you. Just it wants to do that. The weapons obviously are optional. You can leave them attached. You can take them off. They don't look too out of place, and just kind of give them some wrist-mounted blasters, so I don't mind keeping them on. But you do whatever you want. And then we do the legs, and just the backs of the legs here. So you take Wild Rider, the hood and everything folded up already. Make sure to press them on just right. Line up the 5mm holes. Put those on there. Get the tabs lined up. Push them the rest of the way through. So let's do the same thing with Mr. Breakdown. Just line up the slide. Get the 5mm holes lined up. And seated. Get the tabs. The rest of the way on, just like that. And there you go. That's all it takes. Pretty simple, because it's a cartoon style combiner. It doesn't have the intricacy of a fully fledged real combiner, if you ask me. But there he is. This is our Menasor, fine looking, all bulked out with the car kibble all over him. I mean, Motormaster had 80% of the Menasor bot there already. But he's very scrawny looking, very hollow, with that everything filling him out. Oh, might help if I actually flip that in, huh? There you go. So, now he at least looks complete. The arms look a little beefed up, the legs don't have big holes in them, and they're more fleshed out in the back. And overall, he's pretty satisfying to look at, and definitely looks like he jumped straight out of the cartoon. So if that's what you're into, I'm sure you'll be ecstatic. Now, of course, we get the sword, which is, again, just Motormaster's sword. So it's a little small for our big guy here. But you can wield it just like the old toy. And then we also, if you choose to use it, get the little turret that's formed by the remaining pieces of Motormaster's trailer. And it's set up in a way to where he can actually hold it. It's actually tall enough for him to kind of grab a hold of and utilize. You can choose to use it, you can choose to ignore it, totally up to you. I think it's cool that it's just there as an option and that this isn't just, tossed to the side. When I first saw this guy, I really thought that was the case, that this wasn't integrated at all and it was just extra junk that was, thrown in a bin somewhere. But luckily, nope. They actually have you flip this thing around and stuff to where it becomes taller, going from Motormaster to Menasor, and Menasor can actually wield it. So pretty cool. It's got two handles, but it's so small that he looks kind of silly holding both of them. It's like he's holding like this little pea shooter, so I prefer to have him just kind of grip it with one hand, use the sword in the other. But, it's totally up to you how you want to do it. And now is our long-awaited final comparison between these two. We got a little bit of it when I reviewed Motormaster himself, but it wasn't, the complete picture. Now we get to see them both. All 5 members, or in this guy's case, 6 members because of Blackjack here, forming the car armor on the chest. And there's definitely a lot to unpack between these two. I think both of them have their strong points and their weak points. I think as a toy, as something that has to be posed, as something that has to look good on a shelf, the new Motormaster is leagues better than the Combiner Wars version. He just looks awesome. He looks so well put together. He's not flimsy. He doesn't have, parts falling off of him or anything. He's more posable because of his ankle tilt and much better hip articulation. However, the trade-off is that he doesn't do a whole lot, right? He's just kind of this big, giant, cool-looking robot. But when it comes to added play value beyond just posing him, he doesn't have the ability to freely swap his limbs around. He doesn't have the ability to swap limbs with other combiners and, really embrace that whole Scramble City thing and make all sorts of cool combinations. In fact, a while back, I actually did a video on these lost Scramble City combiners that were obscure Japanese combinations of all these different team members. You should totally check that out if you're into Scramble City combiners, because there's a lot of really cool, unique combinations that a lot of people don't know about. But anyway, for me, combiners are all about the idea of multiple bots coming together to form a whole. And in the case of our show-based Menasor, Legacy Menasor, that's not so much the case. Menasor can already turn into a fully functional giant robot. No essential part of his anatomy is missing, not even hands or feet, right? It's all there. It might be kind of scrawny looking, but it's there, right? He can operate on his own without help. And then what we get, instead of bots or vehicles turning the limbs, we just get pretty much car armor for the limbs that are already there. And I always found that approach to be very lazy. And it really all came about from just animators either not understanding what it is they were drawing and what, functionally they were supposed to be, or just kind of taking the easy way out and, slapping cars onto a robot that's already fully formed. We saw that with Menasor. We even saw that with Superion, which makes me really worried that they're going to pull the same junk with Superion if they ever make him in Legacy or whatever comes after. Please stop just slapping vehicles on giant robots. I hate it. So for me, this guy is clearly a better combiner, and in fact is the only one of these two that meets what I would consider the actual definition of a combiner. Because here again, there's no combining. It's more like power linksing, right? Like the Minicon style, where he's just slapping things on himself to get a power boost. This guy, he cannot exist without all 5 or even 6 team members coming together to make a whole. And to me, that is really what a combiner should be. Now, is this a good toy? Is it well done? No. Most people would argue that Menasor was the weakest combiner out of all of Combiner Wars. Him and his mold mates like your Ultra Prime or Optimus Maximus. But just because this particular iteration failed in its execution doesn't mean the approach can't work. I thought Combiner Wars was a brilliant system. It had room for improvement, but the idea was there. And the Combiner Peg system is so solid, they even reused it for this guy, right? The way his lower legs attach to the thighs, it's Combiner Pegs. Now granted, they had these extra little tabs in there for some reason that prevent these legs from being used with anyone else, for reasons unknown. But it shows the system works. And the old Combiner Wars toys, they just kind of failed when it came to ratchets, was one of the biggest ones. A lot of their joint parts, like the elbows, don't have ratchets, so they're not very load-bearing. And then even the pieces that do, like your combiner pegs or like maybe his hip joints, they were weak, right? They had a lot of give. There's a lot of play in between the different clicks of the ratchet. So they would tend to sway back and forth. You have to pose them certain ways. They lean forward too much, lean back too much. And there was a lot of room for improvement. But it wasn't a bad system. They just really needed to tighten things up a bit. And if you want like a really good example of kind of getting on the right track, look at your recent Generation Selects combiners, right? Your Abominus, Volcanicus, God Neptune, all that. They really went and improved things where they did like the much better hands and feet that are more articulated and are a little more specialized to look better. And for the later releases, they even went and tightened up a lot of those joints and things to make them work better. So I think if you took this system, made your ratchets better, put them on the level of like this guy to where they're much tighter, went with the universals for your limb bots instead of ball joints because ball joints wear out too quickly, and then in the important joints, like here in the hips, right, where it would form like part of the bicep, here in the knees, which would form the elbows for the combiner, use ratchets, even if it's like soft ratchets. It's better than just having things flop around. I think if they had done that, and they had made Motormaster a lot better and made him much more along the lines of the canceled third-party release that was through like Black Mamba and Toy World. Put a picture up so you guys can see what I'm talking about. If they had gone that route and kept it like very G1 accurate, I don't even think this guy would have a reason to exist. Like they wanted to redo Menasor because this one was so poorly received, but they went such a completely different route that I feel we lost sight of what it is a combiner is supposed to be. Now, that's not a universal sentiment. A lot of people love the fact that they went with the cartoon route and he's just a big bot with cars on him. That's great. But for more of the combiner purists out there, I'm telling you, all they had to do was keep working with what they had there. They were already on the right track with their Selects releases and those really awesome hands and feet and everything. Just bring these toys to the modern standard. Universal joints, tighter ratchets, like it could work. And it makes me sad that they've stepped away from that because we'll probably never see this system again. We're probably going to see a lot more like this, which to me is a crying shame because what person doesn't want to be able to maybe throw air raid on here as one of the arms? Maybe put blast off down there as one of the legs, and have a lot of fun with it. And maybe even recreate some of the official mix and match combiners that have existed throughout the years. So yeah, I do feel a lot is lost in transition. But I won't go on any further beating that dead horse because I know I bring it up every time I review some component of this guy. Again, I don't dislike this guy. I think he is awesome, and I think he really amazingly executes what he sets out to do. The only thing I really don't like about him is just the fact that Breakdown is a retool of Wild Rider. That's about it. Everything else, I think he's great, and I think they pulled off what they were doing flawlessly. But I personally just really wish they had gone the traditional route because I loved Combiner Wars, and the only thing I didn't love about it was the heavy mold reuse and the shoddy tolerances, which can be fixed with modern engineering. And yeah, it'll be more expensive, but this guy was already significantly more expensive than this guy. So it probably would have cost the same as, what he is. But I don't know, what do you guys think on that one? Do you prefer this approach or this approach just, done better? I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of opinions either way on it, so love to hear what you guys think. And that was our look at the finally complete Transformers Legacy Menasor. This guy took a long time to put together, so long in fact that it spilled over to the next toy line, but I feel it was worth the wait. Despite my misgivings over the style of combination used, and the fact that, some of the individual bots weren't really up to the standard of, some of the others, I think the complete package is a lot of fun. It looks phenomenal. It makes for a great display piece, far more so than the Combiner Wars Menasor, because again, he just looks really cool. He's very clean, the proportions are awesome, and again, if you're a huge fan of the cartoon, he really scratches that itch. So, I like it. I begrudgingly accept him for what he is. It's not my type of combiner, but it is a really, really awesome combining robot. I think, Menasor, but Motormaster really kind of makes the whole thing, right? Because he is the backbone of all this. He's like 80% of Menasor. And I thought it was really ingenious the way they reimagined him to, instead of just being a really, really tiny semi that turns into a robot by itself, they went the Optimus Prime route of having a truck cab robot with a trailer base, and then have that base be part of his body, much in the vein of a Power Master Optimus Prime. And I mean, that's kind of a tried and true method, right? We've seen it time and time again, going from like your Power Master Prime to looking at like Armada Optimus Prime, things like that, where Optimus combining with his trailer into a bigger robot was always something that seemed to work out pretty well. Why not do it for Motormaster, who's also a semi-truck? And I think it was a great idea. Yeah, it's a deviation from what we expect, but in this case, I'd say it was a good deviation. And I would have loved to see them do it in a way to where he could still incorporate traditional combiner limbs, but sadly, that just wasn't meant to be. So, based on what we got, I think it's great. I think, the design team did an amazing job, both on the Hasbro side, the Takara side, because I know they work, hand in hand on these things. And the fact that this thing's, finally fully realized, it's a really, really awesome sight to behold. On the subject of potential recolors or retoolings, I kind of touched on it with Breakdown's review, but the obvious one is a G2 Menasor. And they've already started that train moving because we have Shadow Strip, which is just a newly named G2 drag strip. And the design team said that they want to, keep going with that and eventually finish the team in some shape or form. So I'm sure he may not be called Menasor. He might have a different name if all the other, names are different now. But it'll be effectively a G2 Menasor, right? G2 recolor this guy. The other common fan theory is that they could end up making like a Turbo Master combiner out of this, with Motormaster being replaced with Thunderclash, and then have the other 4 bots just be members of the Turbo Masters. It could work, that's one pretty cool idea. And then after that, I can't imagine they would do too much more with this, unless they went super crazy and did like another Ultra Prime or Optimus Maximus from this, which, I mean, I'd kind of pay to see that. Like, out of, sheer morbid curiosity, because I'm sure it'll look better than the last Optimus Maximus we got, even if I don't like the combination style. So that would be an interesting one to see. But I believe, after the G2 and maybe after, one retooling, that'll be it for this guy. And then they'll move on to the next combiner, which, according to rumors, I believe is Defensor coming up next, which is an interesting choice. He's not the foil to Menasor. That would be Superion. Defensor usually is paired up against Bruticus. But maybe they just figure this combination style that they're so hot on right now works better for him. I can kind of see it, right? Because Hotspot is a fire truck. Fire truck's pretty good size. I could see him, potentially becoming like the super robot form of Defensor and then just slapping the other limbs on again. We'll see what happens. So yeah, very happy with the way this came out. And I think if you've been holding out on this or you have yet to complete the team, you do yourself a favor to complete it, because it's just great. It's an amazing display piece, and it's a lot of fun for what it is. Of course, that is just how I feel about this new Menasor, so now I want to know what you all think of it. Did this live up to your expectations? Do you prefer the way that they did the combination, or you like the other way, but you're okay with what they did here? Or do you not want this for some reason? Maybe you don't like the combination scheme, maybe you just don't like the way it turned out. Any and all feedback is always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this long-awaited look at the Transformers Legacy first combiner, Menasor. And with all that said, I will see you next time.